Mom yelled, "Your kid took the missing $10,000 from the safe." Her voice cracked the room in half. Forks froze midair. The smell of roast chicken turned sour in my throat. Lauren didn't even blink. We saw him near it. She snapped her tone flat, certain. Mason just stood there, dirt still on his sneakers from the backyard, eyes wide like he couldn't breathe. I didn't argue. Didn't ask why they thought a child could steal what adults kept losing. I reached into my tote set, a small silver USB on the table, and said quietly, "Then let's see who really did." The night before that accusation, everything still looked normal, at least from the outside. My parents' house smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner, the kind of scent that pretends nothing bad ever happens here. Mom hummed while folding napkins. Dad checked the grill. Lauren scrolled through her phone, pretending to be bored. Keith sat beside her always with that lazy smirk, the kind that said he pitied everyone but himself. Mason was in the backyard drawing chalk planets on the patio. He's 11, quiet, the kind of kid who still asks before opening the fridge. After my divorce, we moved into a small rental a few streets away. I work freelance accounting jobs, barely enough to keep things steady. My parents started helping with groceries, tuition, small bills. I never asked, but I didn't refuse either. That help came with invisible strings, the kind Lauren could pull whenever she wanted. The first time money disappeared, it was $100 from Mom's wallet. She brushed it off, laughed about senior moments, but her eyes flicked around the room a little too long. The second time, $300 vanished from Dad's locked drawer. He said nothing, just checked the lock twice the next day. By the third time, $500 gone from Lauren's purse, the silence turned poisonous. She said she'd left her bag upstairs while changing the baby. Her eyes landed on me, then slid toward the window where Mason's shoes were lined up. She didn't say the words, but I heard them anyway. After that, Dad installed a safe in his office, one of those heavy fireproof ones, bolted to the wall behind a shelf. A keypad code only he, Mom, Lauren, and Keith knew. He told me over coffee, "I just want peace in this house again." I nodded. But peace isn't what happens when you build walls. Money kept vanishing, small amounts at first, then bigger. 2,000 gone one week, 10,000 the next. No broken locks, no footprints, just tension thick enough to taste. Mom started triple-checking her purse whenever Mason walked by. Lauren began whispering to Keith at the dinner table. Dad kept a record of every withdrawal, every bill. I kept my mouth shut and watched it all rot. When Mom laughed, it sounded rehearsed. When Lauren smiled, it felt like a dare. And Keith, he had started avoiding eye contact with everyone except the safe. I saw it in passing, the way his gaze lingered just a second too long on that office door. I told Dad what I'd seen. He didn't flinch. "Then it's time," he said. That same afternoon, we hid a motion camera inside a fake smoke detector angled right at the safe. Only he and I knew. He patted my shoulder before leaving for work. "If it's who I think it is," he said quietly, "I'll need proof, not guesses." I didn't realize how soon that proof would come, right before the whole family turned on my son. After Dad installed the camera, I thought things might settle. They didn't. The tension only learned how to whisper. At dinner, conversations died halfway through. Mom stared at her plate more than she ate. Lauren kept checking her phone like there was a script she needed to follow. Keith just kept drinking water, silent, twitchy, always near the office. A week later, $2,000 went missing. Another week, $10,000. Clean. No forced entry. Nothing but panic and blame floating in the air like smoke. Mom called a family meeting. The word family never sounded so cruel. We sat in the living room, lights too bright, silence too loud. She started softly, the way she always does before she strikes. "Someone's been taking money from the safe again." Then her eyes landed on Mason. "You were in there yesterday, weren't you?" Mason blinked, confused. Grandpa asked me to hand him his glasses." Lauren cut in before I could speak. "We saw him near it." Her tone matter-of-fact, confident, like a cop reading charges. The room tilted. For a second, I couldn't hear. My pulse was in my throat. Mason looked at me, waiting for me to defend him. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Every pair of eyes in that room was already convinced. Keith leaned back, crossed his arms, let it happen. That silence, his silence, was the confirmation everyone needed. Mason's hands shook. His voice cracked when he said I didn't take anything. Something inside me broke. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet kind of break, the one that rearranges you. I wanted to scream to throw the accusation back at them. Instead, I looked at my son and said, "Go get your sketchbook. Wait for me in the car." He obeyed without a sound. When the door closed behind him, the air felt colder. Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "I'm sorry, Ariana, but it keeps happening. What else are we supposed to think?" I smiled small and sharp. "Maybe the problem isn't who you think it is." Lauren scoffed. "You always twist things." Keith finally spoke. "If you've got something to say it." "Oh, I will," I said. "Soon." No one knew Dad had been watching from the hallway. Later that night, he knocked on my door and handed me the drive. "Footage is ready," he said. "It's all there." I stared at the little silver USB like it weighed 100 pounds. Proof. The thing everyone claimed to want, but no one was ready for. The next day, Mom called again. Her voice was colder this time. "Your kid took the missing 10,000. That was when I stopped explaining and started showing." That Sunday felt wrong from the start. The air was too still, like the house itself was waiting for something ugly. I brought Mason over for dinner because Dad insisted let's clear the air he'd said. But clarity isn't what my family does. We sat in the living room, the TV murmuring some cooking show no one was watching. The baby monitor hummed on the table beside Mom's coffee cup. Dad was in his office checking the safe again. Lauren scrolled, Keith stared at nothing. Mason sat beside me swinging his leg quiet. Then Mom said it. "Your kid took the missing $10,000 from the safe." The sound hit like glass shattering. I didn't even look at her at first. I just stared at Mason's face as the color drained from it. Lauren added calm and sure. "We saw him near it." That's how you know someone's been rehearsing their lie when they say it like a line they've practiced in the mirror. Keith didn't say a word. He kept his eyes on the TV like if he ignored us long enough, truth would skip him entirely. I didn't defend Mason, didn't beg. My hands moved before my mouth did. I reached into my tote, pulled out the small silver USB Dad had given me, and placed it right in the center of the coffee table. The click it made when it hit the wood was louder than anyone's voice. Mom frowned. "What's that footage?" I said. My voice sounded steady, almost too calm. "You wanted proof. Here it is." No one moved. "Play it," I told them. Dad appeared in the doorway, reading the tension before I even explained. He took the drive, disappeared into the office, and closed the door behind him. 5 minutes. That's how long it took. Lauren stood up halfway, then sat back down. Mom wrung her hands. Keith didn't breathe. Mason pressed against me, small and silent. When Dad came back, he didn't look at anyone. He just said, "You should all see this." We followed him into the office. The room smelled of dust and old carpet. The monitor glowed cold blue. The file name read October 21st, to 14 a.m. The video played grainy, quiet timestamp blinking. The office door opened. A figure stepped in. Lauren gasped first. Keith. He moved like he'd done it before, walked straight to the safe, entered the code, opened its stuffed stacks of hundreds into a black duffel bag. Calm, efficient, like muscle memory. Mason's reflection flickered on the screen, his eyes huge, confused. Then Keith's face appeared in full view. Dad paused the frame. No one spoke. Keith's skin turned white. He turned and walked out the front door without a single word. And that's how silence can end a war louder than any scream. Keith didn't come home that night. He left without his jacket, without his car keys, without a single word of defense. The front door slammed once, and the echo stayed long after the sound was gone. Mom sat down on the couch and covered her mouth, muttering something about needing to check on the baby. Lauren didn't move. She just stood in front of the paused video like it might suddenly change if she stared hard enough. Dad stayed in the office, still and silent, one hand on the mouse. Mason pressed against my arm. "Mom, was that really Uncle Keith?" His voice was so small it broke something in me. "Yeah," I whispered. "It was." That night, nobody slept. The house felt stripped bare. You could hear the refrigerator hum, the wind through the vent, every creak of the floorboards, like the house itself was ashamed. The next morning, Keith's car was gone from the driveway. Lauren's face looked hollow, her eyes swollen from crying or not sleeping or both. She didn't look at me when I handed her a cup of coffee. She just said, "You didn't have to trap him like that." I almost laughed. "Trap him? You think I made him steal?" She flinched, like my words hurt more than the truth itself. I didn't know, she said. I thought maybe Mason? Because that was easier, I cut her off. Easier than believing the man you sleep next to could lie to all of us. She didn't answer. When Dad came downstairs, he carried printouts, freeze frames from the footage. Keith's tattoo visible on his wrist, the bills in his hands, the safe wide open. He laid them out like evidence in a courtroom. "No police," he said. "Not yet. But he's done. No more money. No more access." Mom whispered, "But he's family." Dad looked at her like she'd spoken another language. So was Mason. No one said anything after that. By noon, Lauren's debit card stopped working. When she checked her account, it was empty. Keith had cleaned it out before he vanished, checking savings, everything. She sank to the floor with her phone in her hands, whispering his name over and over, like maybe he'd hear her through the static. I didn't touch her. There was nothing left to say. That night she came into my room, eyes red, voice flat. "Show me all of it." I opened the laptop, played every file in silence. One by one, each theft, each night, same bag, same calm movements. She watched every second. Halfway through, her hand covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. When it ended, she just said, "He did it more than once." 3 times, I told her, that we know of. She stood and left without another word. Dad started changing the locks that same night. New bolts, new codes, even cameras on the porch. He called his lawyer the next morning. By evening, Keith's name was removed from every account, every document, every insurance policy, wiped clean. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just our last name scrawled across the front. Inside was a note written in Keith's messy handwriting. I tried. I really did. No apology, no explanation, just a motel receipt from Reno. Lauren read it once, folded it neatly, and said, "He's gone." For weeks, the house felt like a shell. Mom refused to talk about the video, pretending it never happened. Dad worked late, always on the phone. Mason barely spoke. I caught him sometimes standing in the hallway, staring at the locked office door. One night, Dad sat at the table with a glass of whiskey and said quietly, "When the money first started disappearing, I thought it might be him." I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it. I didn't respond. The truth already lived in the silence between us. Lauren moved back into her old room with the baby. She barely ate, barely talked. I thought maybe grief had swallowed her whole. Then one afternoon she came to me and said, "I want to see the footage again." I asked why. "Because I need to hate him properly this time," she said. We watched it again. She didn't cry. When it ended, she said, "He used us all." A few days later, she went to the bank and filed for divorce. Life didn't snap back to normal. It just changed shape. Mason started seeing a therapist. Mom baked too much bread. Dad fixed everything in sight, doors, fences, faucets, like fixing objects might fix us, too. Then just when the quiet started to feel real again, a car pulled into the driveway one night. Headlights cut across the curtains. Dad opened the door first. Keith stood there under the porch light, thin, pale, a duffel bag hanging off one shoulder. His face was drawn eyes, hollow. He didn't step inside. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and dropped it on the mat. He turned and walked away without a word. Inside the envelope were casino chips, pawn slips, crumpled receipts, and one slip that froze us all, a pawn ticket for Lauren's wedding ring, the one she'd hidden at the back of her closet after he left. He'd come back, into the house, into the baby's room. Somewhere, somehow, he'd slipped inside again. Lauren's knees gave out. That night, Dad had every lock replaced before sunrise. When the locksmith left the house was silent except for the ticking clock and the baby's faint breathing on the monitor. Mom whispered, "I don't want to hear his name again." No one disagreed. 2 months later, the call came from Reno. Keith had overdosed in a motel room. No ID, no wallet, no excuses left. We buried him quietly, no speeches, no flowers, just a cold wind and the sound of dirt falling over wood. Standing there beside the grave, Lauren said, "He stole everything that mattered, but at least Mason got the truth." And I realized she was right. That truth had cost us $10,000 and a family we could never rebuild the same way again. After the funeral, the house went quiet in a different way, like grief had drained the last bit of noise. No one mentioned Keith again. Mom stopped setting an extra plate at dinner. Dad barely looked at the chair where Keith used to sit. Even the baby seemed to sense the hush, sleeping longer, crying softer. Lauren moved through the days like a shadow until one morning she knocked on my door. Her hair was tied up, eyes tired but steady. Dad gave me a check, she said. $10,000. He said it's for Mason, for doubting him. She paused, swallowing hard. He said we all owe him more than that. I found Mason outside drawing on the patio again, this time bright chalk suns and rockets. When I handed him the check, he tilted his head. Did we win something, kind of, I said. We just got back what was ours. That night the family sat together for the first real dinner in months. The same roast chicken, the same table, but it felt lighter somehow. Lauren poured wine, Dad carved the meat, Mom even smiled. No one said Keith's name, but his absence finally felt like peace instead of punishment. After dessert, Lauren looked across the table. I told Mom it was Mason, she said quietly. I didn't see anything. I just needed to believe it wasn't him. Mason kept eating calm as ever. I knew, he said. Lauren's lip trembled. I'm sorry. He nodded like forgiveness was easy when you're 11. When the plates were cleared, I stood at the sink listening to their laughter drift through the house. It didn't sound perfect. It sounded real. Spring came quietly, the trees outside my parents' house blooming like they'd been waiting for us to notice again. Life didn't go back to what it was. It became something steadier, smaller, and honest. Lauren found work. Mason laughed more. Mom learned to listen before she spoke. Sometimes I still think about that night, the accusation, the silence, the proof. Justice didn't roar. It whispered one frame at a time until no one could deny it. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, tell me in the comments. You're not alone. Hit subscribe for more stories like this.